Hello and welcome to the Art of Costume podcast. I am your host, Spencer Williams, and thank you so much for joining me for an extra special live episode of the podcast. Hey costume nerds, happy Emmys season. As you all know, we've been sharing conversations with Emmy-nominated costume designers, and earlier this summer, I had the incredible opportunity to partner with the HBO and Warner Bros. Discovery teams to moderate a special panel titled Sketch to Screen, a conversation with HBO and Max Originals costume designers. Gosh, I really can't believe that this happened, but in this conversation, I interviewed 8 amazing designers, some of whom you've already met on this podcast. And I just gotta say, honestly, as a journalist, this really was one of the highlights of my career so far, and I am just eternally grateful to the HBO team for making it all happen and trusting me with this conversation. I enjoyed this experience so much that I reached back out recently with the idea of sharing the record panel with you, our podcast audience, because usually these conversations are exclusive to Academy and Guild members, but thanks to the support of our friends and partners at HBO, we get to share it with you all today. So, after this short break, whether you're watching on YouTube or listening on your favorite podcast platform, I'm thrilled to bring you this live conversation featuring costume designers Bojana Nikitović from Dune Prophecy, Kathleen Felix-Hager from Hacks, McCall from House of the Dragon, and Foley from The Last of Us, Susan Lyall from Mountainhead, Helen Huang from The Penguin, Christina Flannery from the Righteous Gemstones, and Alex Bovaird from the White Lotus. A huge thank you to the teams at HBO and Warner Bros. Discovery for making this event possible, and again partnering with us to be able to share this conversation with you all, the audience. Now, after a quick break, let's get to the conversation. Hello. Good evening. Hey, everyone. Hey. My name is Spencer Williams. I'm from the Art of Costume and host of the Art of Costume podcast. And thank you so much for being here for Sketch to Screen, a conversation with HBO and Max costume designers. Yeah. Now, don't mind me as I read a little poem that doesn't rhyme at all. Costume design and storytelling go hand in hand. Through costume, we understand power and vulnerability in characters like Rhaenyra Targaryen and Valia Harkonnen. It reveals luxury and class among the colorful guests of the White Lotus, the tech bros of Mountainhead, and the crime families of Gotham City. It helps us track the passage of time with characters like Joel and Ellie in The Last of Us. If you're Deborah Vance, costume signals everything from a bad mood to a comeback. Or in the case of the Righteous Gemstones, costume design can transport us back to biblical times as Uncle Baby Billy stars in Teen Just, a young adult drama about Jesus as a teenager. Tonight, we're here to celebrate the achievements of 8 incredible costume designers who have helped bring these brilliant stories and characters to life through their craft. So without further ado, let's introduce our panelists. First up from the White Lotus, Alex Bovaird. Alex. The Righteous Gemstones, Christina Flannery. From The Penguin, costume designer Helen Huang. Ellen. From Mountainhead, Susan Lyall. From The Last of Us, Anne Foley. From House of the Dragon, Caroline McCall. The House of McCall. From Hacks, Kathleen Felix-Hager. And from Dune Prophecy, Bojana Nikitović. Hey, Bojana. All right, well, let's get into it. I'm so excited. Thank you all for being here. So we're gonna kind of just go down the line here and talk about some of our favorite shows. Are we into it? So, Bojana, let's talk about Dune Prophecy first.
Well,
Yeah, sorry, I didn't make the order. I'm a big Dune nerd, and I know Mandy's like, yeah, here we go. Dune prophecy is set 10,000 years before the story of Paul Atreides in a future that still feels like a period drama. So can you tell us about diving into the Dune universe and how you approached researching and preparing to design costumes for this world of rich world building and timeless historical feel?
Well, as you said, yeah, there are many people that really knows a lot about Dune, that are big fans. And so, of course, I knew about the Dunes, but I had to, when I started working on it, I really needed to dig completely into that world of the many, many books, right? Not only the one that we all know, but I mean, I couldn't read all the books, but I read many of them, and I was especially concentrating. Nobody can. Yeah, I think because I was thinking about those people, as you say, those people who knows almost everything about Dune universe, and I didn't want to disappoint them. But on the other hand, we needed to create our own visual, identity and our own world. So yes, I read a lot of books, and then I started. I was especially concentrated on these three that are really related to our story in the Dune prophecy, and then started drawing. Like this panel is from sketch to screen, and it's a long process, as we all know, I'm sure, and so many things happen in that process.
Yeah. So we talk so much about how costume design helps our actors and actresses feel like their character, and I think Dune Prophecy is such a great example of that, especially when it comes to the Harkonnen sisters, Valia and Tula. How did the costumes help these actors shape their performances, particularly through elements like the Bene Gesserit veils, where we can't always see their face, but they definitely feel like Mother Superior when they're under that veil?
Yeah, it was really important. The whole sisterhood look, that was the main thing, to create the good look for the sisterhood. It had to be simple, it had to be, but in the same way, very strong look. We had these dark colors and a palette from gray to black. And I like to work on the details, so we were really trying to get the texture with the special embossing and printing that we did on this part. So when the actresses came for the first fitting, when Emily and Olivia, for example, and the rest of them, the main thing that for me was that they really liked it, and they felt comfortable in it, and still I remember Emily putting the costume in, like, putting her very, starting to walk and said, I know how I'm going to do it now. So it's really, it's a nice thing to hear from the actress.
Right. Nothing makes you feel like Mother Superior than wearing one of Bojana's costumes. Great. Well, let's move on to hacks. Do we have any little Debbies in the audience tonight? Yeah. Kathleen, in this fourth season of Hacks, we really see, Deborah's chasing her dreams, right? But also with that, Deborah's feeling a lot of lows, too. Deborah's not exactly having the perfect season. So can you tell us about conveying that journey for Deborah through costume?
Yeah, I just, she's having a really hard time. Like, she's got her dream, but now it's not exactly what she thought it was going to be. So Ava and Deborah this season have this very contentious relationship. So, just conveying the moods through the costumes, through the colors, through the, Deborah being depressed and being in bed but yet she's depressed in silk and cashmere, so she's Deborah Vance. But it's always nice when the work that we do can drive the story and add a layer of storytelling to what the actors are trying to convey.
And Ava, on the other hand, though, she becomes head writer, which is kind of the goal for her. But with that comes a lot of maturity for Ava. Like, sure, she has a few mental breakdowns at work and like a little bit of blackmail, but that's like such a relatable experience for us. So how did her clothing evolve with this new role? We kind of see Ava mature a little bit this season.
Yeah, you know, when we first met Ava, she was in her early 20s. Now she's in her late 20s. And I think when you make that journey as a human being, you evolve and change. So she's head writer now. She's making more money. We changed the silhouette of her costumes. Same sort of template of like T-shirt, jeans, button down, but just different fabrics, higher end designers. It was nice to see that evolution. And I think we did subtle changes, like she started out season 1 in this very dainty little gold jewelry, and now she moved into this kind of chunkier silver signet rings, and she just small changes. She ditched her leather backpack. She bought a Louis Vuitton tote, you know. Okay. So she's arrived.
There you go, Ava. Yeah, but still within her though that goofiness, because I love that pet detective comment at the very end too. Ava's still Ava at the end of the day.
Sometimes she puts together things that you're like, That's who she is.
Caroline McCall, House of the Dragon. I love this series. I'm a big Game of Thrones House of the Dragon fan. Designing a fantasy series like House of the Dragon is no small task. Even though it's about, you know, dragons and a lot of this mythic stuff, there's still an air of realism to it. So can you walk us through your research process and what helped you get into the mindset of Westeros when you came on to season 2?
A lot of research. Designing a fantasy show is just the same really as a period show, but in that you have to create boundaries and you have to create logic to why things are the way they are. And for us, the world itself is so real in terms of the production design. And so then that has to be reflected in the clothes that people are wearing and the technology that existed. And those technologies are, very similar to the world really hasn't moved on in Game of Thrones to where we are in House of the Dragon. So looking at, the wonderful work that Michelle did on Game of Thrones, what Jani did on the first series, and then sort of plotting all the things that influence the various areas of the world. Westeros is a feudal system, so all the houses have a sort of different ranking within Westeros in terms of their wealth and their position, and that all influences what they can afford and how they present themselves. And lots and lots of research into the medieval world, but also ancient civilizations, and to really embed myself into what's possible, what people could and would make and wear. And if I had my way, everything would be hand stitched and, right. It would be as it would have been. But my main objective is that it's clothes. We're making a wardrobe of clothes for whoever the character is, and that they feel that when they put on that clothing, they become the character, and that it shouldn't feel like they're wearing a costume. They've become Rhaenyra, or they've become Daemon.
Sure. And
it's the same across the board. Every essay that's dressed, you take a step back and you look and say, do they look like a real person in this real world, or does it look like a costume? And if it looks like a costume, we've not done our job.
Sure. And season 2 is really about setting the board for war, right? So the Greens of King's Landing continue in their opulence. They're at war, but they're still having a good time. While Rhaenyra and her followers on Dragonstone seem to adopt a more serious, minimalist look. It's very grim on Dragonstone. So how did you approach this contrast?
Well, it was a really great opportunity coming on to series 2, that there's this natural divide between the Greens and the Blacks. And it felt what Shani had done in series 1 was Viserys had this very comfortable reign. He'd had lots of peace, and he had sort of assimilated, I felt, into the society of Westeros. And so when Rhaenyra leaves, to go to Dragonstone and really claim her Targaryen identity. It was the opportunity to like lean into that. What is the Targaryen identity? And then look back at maybe what Daenerys was doing in Game of Thrones, to claim her identity as a Targaryen and what she thought a Targaryen was, and sort of show where some of the things she wore may have come from in terms of textiles. And if you're in King's Landing, the High Towers, they're influenced by their faith, the faith of the Seven, and the Targaryens. The dragon is almost their faith. So in both, you see the iconography of those things within their clothes, and also the colour is a massive part to play across the board, and Valyrian steel in the Targaryen colour palette, all that.
Right.
Lots to pick from.
Right. Let's move to The Last of Us and Foley. Ooh, this show. I still haven't stopped crying.
I know. Same.
So this second season does a lot to show the passage of time, right? So within a story, 5 years have passed since the events of season 1. Ellie was 14 in season 1, and now she's 19. And Joel has just gone like full dad mode at this point. He's the city planner of Jackson. He's like a couple years from retirement at this point of everything he's going through. So how did you approach aging these characters so subtly through costume? And what were some of the visual cues used to reflect how much they've changed in those 5 years?
Well, with Ellie specifically, going from a 14-year-old kid to a 19-year-old young woman, it was really about silhouette. And it was about color palette. You really get to see this in episode 6 when you flash back. And we start that episode with Ellie turning 15 that morning, and she's in a baggier t-shirt. There's, it's a brighter color, there's pattern. And as Ellie progresses through that episode, and you get to see her on each one of her birthdays, and eventually turning 19, you see the palette starts to get darker, it gets bluer. And I also made a conscious decision to keep her and Joel's color palette very close to each other, the closer we got to her turning 19. And so throughout the season, they have a very similar color palette. But also with Ellie, it was really about shifting that silhouette, hemming the t-shirts so that they were a little bit shorter in the body, the jeans were a little bit slimmer. The whole silhouette slimmed down to show that she is becoming an adult. And with Joel, Pedro and I actually talked about this in his fitting about, hey, wouldn't it be great if Joel started tucking in his shirts like Tommy?
Yeah.
He's noticed that Tommy's a dad. Tommy is the pillar of society. So Joel's gonna tuck his shirts in. He's gonna, he's a dad now, and he's a responsible member of the society. So, and it's just a little touch like that, changes the character a little bit.
Right. Let's talk about Jackson. And this is the town in which Joel, Ellie, Tommy, and many other survivors live. And one thing I really appreciated about the second season was just how grounded the costumes felt, right? There's a real sense that these survivors are repairing, reusing, and taking care of their clothing, because this is a town that's functioning with all things considered. But then also in episode 2, that world is thrown into chaos. And you and I were talking the other day and gave me some numbers. 579 total fittings for episode 2, 3,800 garments through breakdown, and 191 infected costumes on screen. So, can you
Episode 2 was quite a undertaking. I think it was a 28-day shoot, and I had 3 crews running, one in Alberta in the mountains, doing all that snow stuff that was real, and then Jackson. So the attack on Jackson. So it was all kind of happening simultaneously. And then, of course, as a lot of you know who've done television, especially on this panel, it's like then you're prepping the next episode. So then I'm building the Seraphites at the same time. So it was definitely a challenge, but thankfully I had an incredible crew up in Vancouver and who helped, bring it to life. Because at a certain point, we all become sort of project manager.
Right. And talk to me about the mindset of all the survivors in this town and how they take care of their clothing.
Well, Jackson is a functioning town. They have power, they have water. So Craig Mazin and I had multiple conversations about, we want to make sure that Jackson looks different than the QZs that you saw in season 1. So in season 1, that was a road show. Joel and Ellie on the road, going from one QZ to the next, and in those QZs, those were not functioning societies. That was complete survival. Jackson's kind of the opposite. And so the clothes are all lovingly worn and taken care of. And we actually came up with aging palette that we called the Jackson patina. So everything got aged and overdyed with this really warm tone to it for Jackson. And you would see the difference between the Jackson the folks that lived in the town and then the refugees that would come into the town. They were a lot more ragged and dirty from being on the road.
Yeah. Oof, we could talk about The Last of Us for days and days. I think we were all in our rooms this weekend watching Mountainhead, which Susan Lyall designed the costumes for. So glad it just came out just the other day. We're all loving it. So Susan, tech billionaires are a very specific breed of person. Totally different from the old money types, that we'd see in the Gilded Age maybe. So how did you go about capturing that distinction of costume design in Mountainhead?
Well, first I'd just like to say that Mountainhead is so different than the stories I'm hearing here. Because it's like 4 dudes in a ski house, okay? and the schedule was 22 shooting days, that's it. Oh. And every costume came fresh out of a box or fresh out. It was very different than what you've heard so far. But to find the individuality of 4 tech billionaires, the director Jesse Armstrong, who is known for writing Succession, is no stranger to this world. And he had a trove of research. And this is not visual research. These are podcasts and articles from The Atlantic. And this, there's a lot of stuff. And you don't really choose a person and make a biopic of somebody. All of these characters are really a pastiche of a bunch of people. I mean, there are a lot of billionaires out there. And if you watched any of the inauguration, you could pick them all out and decide which one, a little bit of this, a dash of that, and you would create someone. Honestly, it sort of worked like that, and it happened very quickly. And it had the parameters were very specific, meaning it's 4 weeks long. They're coming in. It's 36 hours in story time. And there were a few things he asked for, and very specifically, and then that was kind of it. Just go. And so it's just a very different experience. I'm sure everybody here has done something like that, where a contemporary show that happens at lightning speed.
So the thing about this cast of characters is, even though they're billionaires, they're not very loud, except maybe when they're on the mountain. But when they're in the home, there's just subtle choices that you make to really.
Honestly, there are plenty of luxury items, luxury labels that were interested in these guys, but it's not what they're like. They're not. They're men who have accomplished something through their business acumen and their hard work. They are not succession families. They're not that level. They had to sort of get there. Certainly there would be some privilege, I'm sure, but they had to get there. So I feel like they never really show off their wealth in their clothing.
Right.
They show it off in other ways.
Yeah, it's like when you're rich enough, you could just wear sweatpants every day if you want to, which is goals.
So a lot of labels are common now. Like, who cares about a Montclair? Really. So. Yeah.
Helen, let's talk about the Penguin. This is such a fun show. Okay, there you go. Yeah. Oz, aka the Penguin, played by Colin Farrell. he's a character that's deeply concerned with being at the top. You know, he's very fascinated by all these people of his youth that are gangsters that dress up in their suits, and very fascinated with masculinity. So how did those ideas of identity and masculinity, ambition, inform your costume design for Oz?
I think we started out with Oz, the idea that where he grew up in his environment, crime is a source for upward mobility where institutions fail people of that community. And so in a weird way, his masculinity has to do with a bunch of things that are contradictory. Like he views himself as a nurturer, someone who's capable of bringing someone up, like he did with Victor, but he also views himself in terms that he is also capable of extreme violence. And also, there is this element of Oz that is, like you said, a showman, and so his obsession with sort of 1940s movies was a big cue for us in terms of how to dress him. And then on top of that, we think with the Falcons, he's a bit odd duck for them because we view them as crime institutionalized wealth, and he is a poser in many ways, trying to craft his ultimate image. And so it's like, what does he think a man looks like? And so we spent a lot of time, tailoring his silhouette to be more 70s, using very sharp and rigid materials, dressing him darker, and giving him a very firm V shape down to his really pointy-toed shoes.
Right.
So yeah, his masculinity was definitely a ball of everything that you would not typically think of, such as like a provider for his mother, something that's kind but also a little bit odd, if you think in context of him being a villain in the Batman universe.
Yeah. It's definitely a little showy with his purple car as well, too, or plum, I should say. Let's talk about Sophia Falcone, who is probably my new favorite villain ever. When we meet her, she's fresh out of Arkham Asylum, so she's very kind of buttoned up, and you get this idea that she's still kind of in prison when she gets out of this asylum. But as the show kind of carries on, you start to introduce all of these reds and these different silhouettes, and you can just feel the rage on her as we progress through the story. So can you walk us through this evolution and how you use costume to reflect her growing dominance?
Well, with Sophia, it was a hard task because they did want her to feel buttoned up. I didn't want her to feel like, traditional kind of mob wife type of look. And we were thinking about how can you make a more buttoned-up silhouette a little bit rebellious. And so I was very inspired by the 1960s where the micro mini was coming in. And so it was like shifts where it became this formless thing, but because the skirt and the hemline was so short, it's like rebellious in femininity, rebellious in womanhood. And then there was another set of photographs in Vogue of Kate Moss by Peter Lindenberg, where it was 90s doing 1960s, and it did have this casual kind of also rebellious form. And so we thought it was very good for Kristen, our actress, to start her off in that. So it's buttoned up, but has a twist and a power to it that combats the Falcone's masculinity and definitely Oz's masculinity as well. As the series progresses, we really decided that, like you said, we would change her texture. We would try to make her physically bigger. So there was a lot of really big coats. There were big pops of color throughout. But we did want the whole piece to feel like she did reach into the same closet. Nothing irks me more when it's like she feels better and so she buys new clothes. That's
right.
like definitely not my view of females. And so it's just she's putting things together in a very liberated and deliberate way to show off her new taking up of space. And for that, we source a lot of vintage whenever we can, just so she feels timeless. my ACD is here. He got kicked off the Real Farfetch. I think every website that sells vintage. And he's right there. And then gotten new email names so we could go back on it and do another round of it. And so, yeah, I'm very happy that she resonates with so many people.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I hope free Sophia Falcone. I hope we see her in the future. Christina Flannery, it's so good to see you. I feel like we talk every single day. This is our first time. So it's so funny to me because I feel like I've cried the most over the Righteous Gemstones this year, which is crazy because Anne Foley's right there. So Christina, this final season of Righteous Gemstones, you tackled a wide range of time periods from the Civil War era to early 2000s with the Jimmy Neutron shirt, jetpacks, boats, angel wings, a full-on biblical musical, and at times you're working on some of these things at the same time. So how did you approach designing such a wide range of styles and time periods all within one season?
Well, I feel like it was a fever dream. I feel like we were doing a lot of the shoot. Basically, we started with season 3 was 9 months. This time we came around, we had to do it in 6 months. So when I got the scripts, I was told initially, it's going to be really like a lot easier. We're going to focus on characters. We're not going to like blow anything out of the water. And then I got the first script, and it was a Civil War episode, and I was like, holy shit, great. Okay, so
with
we're going to
Bradley Cooper, by the way. Yeah.
Thank you, Danny. So we did a Civil War feature film alongside of doing the telethon episode, and then just like as we were all saying, like you have to work on so many other episodes, block shooting, things you have to do. It's absolutely impossible to do any of this stuff without your crew. You have to have a crew that loves and cares about each and every character, costumes, and literally can stay up all hours of the night answering emails. We work, we're on call. We work 24 hours a day. So, yeah, I think pulling this off was one hell of a job. It just wasn't possible without my crew, and I think that's really what you have to have. You have to have a kick-ass crew, and I absolutely did. So that's how I did it. Yeah.
Shout out to all the crews out there making all this happen. It's also Pride Month, so I think it's only fitting that we talk about one of the costumes that's out right outside these doors. There's a gorgeous outfit from Calvin and Keith's wedding. Sorry, spoiler alerts for those of you that haven't seen. Sorry. And also we get to see Kelvin and Keith set up the Prism, which is a LGBTQ-friendly ministry. So what did it mean to you to close out this season with this very special note?
Yeah, well, I think if you watch the show, you're like, are they ever going to kiss? Like, the whole time you watch the show, you're like, enough, let's do something already. So, again, getting the script, you're like, finally, it's happening. Doing Prism was so much fun. I think, for me, I grew up watching 90s Club Kids. Geraldo Rivera, 1994 episode of the Club Kids, Michael Alley coming in. I was just, it's incredible. I feel so fortunate as a queer person to follow this storyline through and finish off the finale of the whole show doing this. I'm so fortunate. I think Gemstones is a great show that you can bring drag, bring queerness, peacock, and you see it in all the costumes. You see it in Baby Billy and the oyster shell costume. Yeah, I mean, I could go on and on. I think it's very obvious that I watch endless amounts of RuPaul's Drag Race, and call me if you need somebody. But yeah, I think it means a lot. I mean, it really means so much. I think, especially, thank you for bringing it up during Pride Month. It's a show of. It's a boys' club, It's a show that's very a religious show that you just don't really get this kind of stuff on these kind of shows or in general. So. I'm honored that I got to be able to tell this story, this narrative, and I got to do it with these amazing guys. And that's it.
I'm going to miss this series so much.
know.
We need a Baby Billy spinoff. I'm just saying that in front of everyone here. Alex Bovaird, this is my first time talking to you when you're not in another country, so I'm very excited about that. The rival episode of every season of The White Lotus is like my Super Bowl, when they're all just lined up, getting ready to enter the resort. We're all just so excited for that. My favorite group this year was, of course, the Girls Trip trio, Jacqueline, Lori, and Kate. And there's a subtle doppelganger feel about all of them, but each of their personalities do kind of peek through, especially like Lori, who's kind of like a mess at times and just trying to get it together. So how do you approach costuming them as a group while still highlighting their individuality?
Well, I designed them as if they were one character in a way with 3 heads. And Mike White described them as one blonde blob. And so when you meet them, he asked Michelle to dye her hair blonde so that they all had the same hair color. And we wanted them to be a little bit interchangeable at first. But then as you dig a little bit deeper, there's differences. And there was a strong theme of everybody having a facade and fronting, and these girlfriends pretending that everything was okay. And so we told that story with their clothes. And Jacqueline is an actress, so we imagine she has access to a lot of designer clothing and posh bags and accessories. And all 3 of them were my Sex and the City trio, really, where they had, like, you couldn't really see, but they had amazing shoes and way too many jewelry choices, and they were fronting for each other, pretending that their lives were perfect when each of them had things going on inside that they needed each other for. So yeah, that's how I approached it. And the White Lotus is always very colorful and very fun, so it was great to play around with these ladies who were trying to impress each other. So in a way, even though it's a contemporary show, everybody puts on a bit of a costume on the White Lotus. They dress for dinner, and they pretend.
Right. And as messed up as the Ratliff family is, if you know, you kind of know, you can't help but love them in their privileged Southern style, especially when it comes to the one and only Parker Posey as our lorazepam loving matriarch. I could watch an entire hour of her every Sunday just walking around chewing people out with her parasol, honestly. How did you land on Victoria's look, and how does it reflect both her status and that unforgettable personality?
Well, I'm married to a Southerner, and I live in the South. I've been to quite a few places where I've come across ladies a little bit like Victoria. So, and I bought a lot of things down in the South. There was a website called Tuckernuck that I bought a lot of things from. So before Parker was cast, because everybody gets fit in Thailand. I think I saw a couple of people before I left, but I have to bring a lot with me. So I'd already started shopping way before Victoria came to Thailand, and I went to this lady in Alabama and bought a lot of very colorful caftans, and I imagined that Victoria is comfortable and she doesn't go to the beach, she doesn't want to get sandy, she doesn't go to the pool, she doesn't really do anything, she doesn't even know where she is. She thinks she's in Taiwan. So we just kept her comfy and, larger than life. And Parker is, when she was delivering her lines, I could tell she was going to be very memeable and very funny. So yeah, it's always a lot of real life inspiration on the White Lotus because it's a satire. So we try and nail it with who they are, bordering on stereotyping, and but also try and make them relatable and likable, so want them to look good as well.
Right. I feel like I have time for one more question each, yeah? Okay, cool. They said, yeah, let's do it. One more round. Bojana, there is a beautiful red wedding gown right outside these doors, and I love it because you could feel the cagey, this poor woman is getting to marry someone that's, I don't know how old, but not old enough. So can you walk us through that inspiration and how you were able to make her feel so trapped in that very stunning gown?
Yeah, I'm glad that you feel like that, because that was the idea. When I think of this amount of sketches and drawings that I made for that dress, I mean, it's amazing. And recently I just, like an iPad, when all of a sudden you get a picture, and that was one of the first inspirations, and I couldn't believe from where I started and where we finished. So, but on the end, finally we got there where we wanted to be. So, first of all, it was such a task to find the fabric that we wanted a red dress. I talked a lot with the director, Anna Foster, and we wanted and the showrunner, Alison Shepker, we wanted the red dress, and we were trying to find, but we all know how difficult it is to find the right fabrics nowadays. So finally, and I'm glad that we all talked about the crew. The crew is so important for all of us working in costumes. So I have a wonderful textile designers. I have a wonderful assistant who is really good in everything. And we did so many. We went to that laser cut world where you apparently can do whatever you want. So finally, we created our own fabric for that dress, and laying one layer of fabric on the top of the basic fabric, but from laser cutting in between. So it's, I think it can be seen here, and also the veil that originally was supposed to be totally transparent, like a nude color, but then we understood that veil will kill our red. So we came to the red veil and we added the pieces, and then it was a headpiece that was supposed not only to show that trapped look that we see on the upper part of the dress, but also to be easy to put on, and because in a certain moment when she finished the whole ceremony, she just take it off and she runs into her world, into her real world. So those were all difficulties, and those were all things that we had to achieve. But I'm saying we're working really close together, all of us, and working very hard. I think that finally we got there.
Yeah, you got it. It's tragically beautiful. I really hope everyone walks out there after this, which will be shortly, and you're able to check it out. Yeah. Kathleen, can we please talk about the most unhinged character in the Hex universe, Dance Mom?
Yes.
And also, I wish Julianne Nicholson would run out here and dance for us at the end.
Here she comes.
Yeah.
She was amazing. When they cast Julianne to be Dance Mom, I was like, what? Because she's so known for her dramatic, and she's a very serious actor, and Dance Mom is completely unhinged. And when she came for the fitting, we probably had the best 2 hours. I mean, we just laughed, and I was taking pictures, and she was saying had been choreographed and working with the choreographer about her silly dance, and she was like dancing all around. And, she had an arc where she started out in her TikTok videos, which is very sort of wholesome and sweet and very little corny. And then she goes completely off the rails. So it's always fun when you have those moments, and when an actor is like so game to just dive in, and it was really fun to work with her this season.
Oh, yeah, bring Dance Mom back if she recovers. I don't know. It feels debatable.
She was pretty high the last time we saw her. So.
Not looking good. Caroline, dragons are not real, so I've been told, allegedly. But the dragon fire very much is, and it really takes a toll on these costumes. Can you talk about, especially Rook's Rest, where we see an entire army get obliterated by a dragon fire? That must have been fun to deal with.
Yes, so much fun. Yes, so all the burns you see on House of the Dragon are real stuntmen burning. We did 48 burns on Series 2, which actually amounted to 80, because you can have 2 goes at it, apparently, in the same costume. And so the armies are designed first. They're the first things that are designed because it takes so long to manufacture them. So before the stunt coordinator is on board, we've already designed the costumes. So by the time he tells us who's going to burn, then it's then we just have to figure it out. But when you burn a stuntman, it all has to be natural fibres. Everything has to be recreated naturally. So if there are metal elements, for example, you recreate them in leather. Chainmail can be knitted or printed. You have to fit over their burn suit, which is like a racing driver suit.
Wow. And
they have prosthetic masks. And we recreate the costume over that bulk.
Yeah, we're all exhausted.
So like Darklyn, who's a Queen's Guard, when he's burnt, his armour was completely recreated in leather. So yeah, it's a lot, and it's not just. The crew are absolutely amazing, but the crew that looking after a stuntman who's about to burn is quite nerve-wracking. Also you have harnesses and pads and all sorts of things going on underneath as well, because they could be being thrown through the air and then set alight.
Yeah.
So we just roll with the punches and then burn them.
Yeah. Every time I see dragons now, I'm going to think of you like, ooh, no. And one of my favorite moments of the entire season is when Ellie and Dina show up to Seattle and they're like, this seems nice. And then you find out not really the case. There's two different factions going on here, the WLF and the Seraphites. And I'm so fascinated by the Seraphites because they feel very practical and they're choosing to live in the forest and the parks.
Well, they're a religious sect. They're very Luddite. They make their own weapons, they make their own clothes. And the Seraphites were one of the things that actually drew me to wanting to do season 2, because I was really fascinated with them in the game. I did not play the game. I watched a 15-hour playthrough, so I feel like I played
Too scary.
Yeah. And in the game, they weren't really fleshed out as much as they should have been. And I did work with Naughty Dog, and we had multiple conversations with the game designers about how they got to this place and where we could take it from there. And the concept illustrator that I work with, Imogene Chase, is amazing.
Imogene.
Yeah. And we really had a incredible time fleshing them out and changing them a little bit from the game, but staying true to the essence of what they were in the game. But like in the game, they're wearing raincoats, and it just didn't make sense to me. So I thought maybe it should be something like a poncho that they would make. And because they're close to the water in Seattle and they're in the forest, the color palette is of the forest, but maybe they went to that abandoned marina and they got the canvas off of boats, and that's what they used to create their ponchos. And then my breakdown team hand-painted the Seraphite symbol on the back of each one of the ponchos, so everybody had their own personalized Seraphite symbol.
Right. Ooh, so terrifying, and I can't wait to see more of them in the future. Kind of. I mean, I'm a little terrified, but excited to see them. Susan, I was going to ask you about the quick timeline, but I think we nailed that. So tell me about collaborating with director Jesse Armstrong, who obviously just came off of Succession. So what was it like collaborating with your director on Mountainhead?
Well, it was his directorial debut, which he's really a very nice man, and he said, I hope you don't mind working with a first-time director. I was like, it's okay. I'll manage.
We'll be fine.
Yeah, we'll be okay. I mean, it's not like you haven't spent years and years on sets.
Yeah.
So he was very easy to work with. His direction was very collaborative. He had a few notes. If you see the film, you'll see that the characters, they all arrive, and then they take a snowmobile trip, and they all wear the exact same orange outfit that kind of sort of You know, I don't want to say unify, it neutralizes them. You know, they step out of everything. Then they come out of their arrival clothing. Then you see them disrobing and gathering as they're getting bad news. And his one note to me was to make sure they were all wearing their long underwear, their long johns, for the next almost 14, 15 pages, where they have this rapid-fire dialogue about the world falling apart and what they would do to rule the world. And he really wanted it to be in their long underwear, and because there is something quite funny about that. And I will say that when you tell an actor in a fitting that you're going to do this in your long underwear, you might as well have said Speedo, because it was really, you know, a cause for great concern. But that was his really a very important note that he wanted. He didn't ask for, you know, he's very, you know, he has an opinion and so on, but there were very few requests, but things like that. It was more about where you find the change in the story, because it all happens in this truncated time. So I found him incredible to work with, frankly.
Yeah. He also gave us like evil Steve Carell, which is so frightening as well, too. Helen, let's talk about Gotham City as a whole. What I love so much about it is just how real and authentic this Gotham City is. It's a comic book world, but it very much mirrors almost like New York City or Chicago in ways. So can you talk about your approach to building a Gotham that feels inclusive and reflective of the real world while staying true to the show's genre?
I think, you know, it stems from the movie that Matt created this world. And so in our version, we were talking about what the grounds up looks like, because usually in a Batman movie, it's Batman's point of view. I think they talked a lot about it needs to feel real, but a step up. But my approach to anything, even contemporary shows or movies, is that everything is edited. It's a point of view from your director to your DP to your production designer. And so, like, you could look at anything as long as it's emotionally truthful to the narrative that they're trying to tell. And so for Gotham, we were trying to make it a timeless city. Mm-hmm. So we looked a lot at New York in the late 1970s when institutions were failing and it was very bankrupted and sort of not caring for their citizens, to give Oz this environment where he could rise up. You know, for Oz, we didn't even look at anything current. We looked at the 1970s. We looked at a little bit of 80s. We looked at a lot of 1940s because he likes that classic masculine look. For Victor, it was 1990s. For Sophia, it really ranged all over the place because of her narrative. And so, yeah, for me, it's sort of looking at the composition of what you're trying to make versus real on a very flat dimension.
Sure. Well, the rest of this conversation is basically about Walton Goggins. He's not here, but he's very much in the room with us with our last two designers. Christina, Baby Billy, Walton Goggins came straight from hanging out with Alex to come hang out with you, I believe. Baby Billy is quite the costume designer's dream in the sense that he just really is over the top at all times. And in this season, he's now starting to work on this feature film. So he starts to get into the Hollywood mindset, which comes with like some cocaine and, you know, all sorts of good stuff. It's right outside, actually, that great telethon look. I was hoping you could tell us about Baby Billy's final season.
I thought you meant cocaine was right outside. Yeah, he did just come off of the White Lotus. And okay, so let me just start with the oyster shell costume from season 3. How do you come back? How do you where do you go from this? Yeah. This thing is insane. He's in a walkabout costume. I cannot imagine. Okay, yes, he got way crazier because he became a coke-fueled 70s style director. And I think, you know, we looked at zoot suits. We looked at, a lot of my reference for him this season definitely came from like 70s porn. And the thing about Baby Billy, which is, well, let me say, the great thing about Walton is, I will give him, I mean, I think you can probably attest to this. He is a champion for costume designers and costume. And you don't find that. You know, he goes on and he talks about costumes to, he's just an incredible person. So great to work with. I've worked with him for years. And him coming off of White Lotus, which is a completely different experience, coming in there and being like, oh, I'm going to put this gigantic child's outfit on, which is the Telethon outfit you see out there. And he's always game. And, you know, he's just a joy to be around and collaborate with. So, you know, yeah, it's as simple as cocaine, the 70s, and Elvis, you know? So I don't know what more to say about it than that. I mean, I think, you know, we got Ynez. We're going to do this biblical thing. I was like, holy shit, this is weird too. But working on a show like The Righteous Gemstones, you just never know where you're going to go, where Danny's going to take you. And, you know, he can take you to Ynez, he can take you to the Civil War, or he can take you like to him getting clotheslined by somebody at an alligator farm high on cocaine. So a great character. And I feel so fortunate, and I can't imagine I'll ever get anybody as fun to work with than that.
Right. And Alex, we're wrapping it up with you. Chelsea and Rick, played by Amy Lee Wood and Walton Goggins, on the other hand, are very free-spirited compared to the other characters we talked about. Rick always seems like he's one breath away from a mental breakdown, while Chelsea's kind of keeping him grounded, very bohemian. So can you talk about designing for these two, especially given how different their energies are?
Yeah, and I'm not sure if he did it for you, but for White Lotus, he stays in character all day. You know, he's Rick in the dressing room, he's Rick at lunch, he's Rick waiting to go on camera. So a really intense guy to talk to. These two were supposed to sort of roll off the boat, and you wonder where they've come from, what their story is. They're not quintessential White Lotus guests. They look a little bit more ragamuffin, and they've been on the go. They've been out of their countries. Chelsea left England a while ago. Rick left America a while ago. Chelsea's running towards something, Rick is running away, and they just find each other. And they were really a pleasure to design for, because they're both really nice people. When Walton is Walton, he, as Christina was saying, he's really awesome. He was supposed to be bald. It's written that Rick is bald, completely bald, and he was supposed to, you know, in the first couple of days in Thailand, get his head completely shaved. And so one of my first interactions with him was he was really upset, and he really wanted to talk to Mike about how he didn't actually want to be bald. He didn't want to go through with it. So that was a big hurdle for him to cross. And then once he won that battle, he was happy to slide into my shirts. And we had a lot of fun. I mean, I had 40 different shirts for him, because we're shooting on an island in the middle of the Sea of Thailand. So you have to bring everything with you. And we had a lot of fun. All the actresses always wanted to wear Rick's shirts as well, so they got divvied out. And then Chelsea, she's got an eclectic style, and she gets things from flea markets and packs as she goes, and they're just real free spirits. And I knew where the story was going, so just tried to make them more and more romantic as the series progressed.
Sure. And unfortunately, that brings us to the end. Please give a huge round of applause for each of these incredible designers: Alex Bovaird, Christina Flannery, Helen Huang, Susan Lyall, and Foley, Caroline McCall, Kathleen Felix-Hager, and Bojana Nikitović.